You're listening to Game and Chat, where we level up with conversations about gaming then and now. I'm your host, Daniel, aka One to Switcheroo. So let's press start and game on. Welcome everyone to another episode of Game and Chat, streamed directly to your favorite podcast platform. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, or all of the above to support the cause. And with that being said, hello everybody, welcome back. After a needed break, we are here back on the podcast table and we are ready to kick off the second half of season 1 of Game and Chat. I hope you guys have been well. I myself needed this much time to get some stuff together done, and now we are ready to get back and share more stories, more gaming anecdotes, and more of my personal gaming journey through different topics in the gaming industry. Nintendo, most likely, as you guys know for sure, but just thoughts. And I'm very excited because we're coming back strong. We're actually 4-5 days away before the release of The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, which I'm very, very excited. The more I see on the trailers and the gameplay and what people have been saying so far about the game, it really makes me excited for the future of 2D Zelda. So might as well talk about my favorite 2D Zeldas so far. As you know, before 3D Zelda, there was 2D Zelda. If it wasn't for 2D Zelda, we wouldn't got a 3D Zelda. So it's always good to get to know and explore the origins of such a wonderful franchise and legendary, no pun intended, as this amazing game and story is. So I'm very excited to touch on my favorite topics on 2D Zelda. Whether 2D Zelda is better than 3D Zelda, we'll leave that up to discussion of personal preferences. Right now, we're just gonna reminiscent of my time, myself, mostly with my Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance experiencing these games, and how made me even more of a fan of the Zelda series as I am till this day. And of course, we need to take a moment to thank you, everyone. I know it's been a couple weeks, and I really appreciate for everybody who has catch up on the podcast. Ironically speaking, the podcast actually is getting views. It really makes me happy that some of you have been re-listening to the episodes, and there's new people actually interacting and getting to know me through this adventure behind the mic that I'm taking. So thank you. It's really appreciated. It's very comforting to see those numbers going up, and we're going to keep going up. We're going to keep releasing episodes, and we're going to stick around till the end of the year. And there's going to be a lot of cool stuff coming. We're going to have a couple of new formats coming up, which I'm very excited about. By the month of October, you start to notice them. So I hope you guys are ready for the ride again on the second half of the Game and Chat Season 1. But before we get deep into the episode, I need to make a comment of what I'm currently playing so far. And I have to say this because this game has been quite a breath of fresh air, a huge surprise, especially for where it's coming from. And I'm having a full blast playing it. And of course, it is Astrobot on the PlayStation 5. My God, how much I didn't know I needed this kind of game, especially because for us Mario enthusiasts that we've been waiting for so long for a new 3D Mario, even Mario Galaxy fans that think that Mario Galaxy 3 is lost in the development, or if it's even a thought, well, we got a little scratch on our backs with Astrobot, and this game has been a joyride from start to end. Yes, I might not be familiar with some of PlayStation iconic characters from the past, but the fact that they're taking this approach for us to introduce you to these characters on a way that only Nintendo would have thought about, and it's just been a wild ride. I'm on the war number 4 right now. I'm very close to finish it, but it's been quite a joy, and I kind of wait to see how everything ends up. And I'm gonna 100% it. This actually might be my first PlayStation game that I will go platinum. So I just wanted to put it out there. This game is awesome. Please play it if you haven't done so. It will really scratch your Mario itch, your 3D Mario itch, for a long time until we eventually get the announcement on this upcoming console. But anyway, closing the parentheses, we're back on the episode, everybody. I've been keeping you waiting for so long, so let's get started today. It's all about 2D Zelda. We're getting ready for Echoes of Wisdom, so we're gonna take a little trip to memory lane to my favorite 2D Zelda game. So welcome to episode 11 of Game and Chat, The Legend of Zelda from a 2D perspective. And of course, we always get started with how we come across 2D Zelda for the first time. How did Daniel came across a 2D Zelda game? Well, the fun fact is that I did not. My actually first Zelda game was Ocarina of Time on the Nintendo 64, and that's how I even realized that Zelda was even from the past consoles. And you would say, wow, Daniel, you even like skip a Link to the Past or even the first Legend of Zelda. I mean, more so because my previous consoles before the 64, I had the NES that was from my sister, so of course they weren't interested in that kind of game. And on my aunt that also had a NES, they only had the Mario games. They didn't have any Legend of Zelda, so I didn't have that exposure to the previous Legend of Zelda's iterations in 2D. So yeah, this started with Ocarina of Time, but of course that opened the doors of like, what else is from this game? Like, where this game coming from? And that's where I started coming across for these games. But of course, I had to go back and replay some of them. And we're going to start, of course, with how the introduction on the 2D era became. And that's how the birth of a legend in 2D games came to be. And we're talking about the first ever Legend of Zelda game released on the NES on 1986, which basically is the introduction to the Legend of Zelda and Link as a character. And who would have thought that that little elf, as a lot of people might confuse him from, will become one of the main icons in gaming, right alongside Mario and other amazing characters that we have till this day that had persisted and has sustained the test of time. And they are as relevant as they were back in the day, if not more, to be completely honest. But anyway, The Legend of Zelda was released in 1986, and my experience playing it, of course, I mean, I'm gonna be completely honest, I never finished the game. I was very young. Even up until this day, I haven't finished the game. I did get a little farther though. But now you can tell by looking at this game, for example, how modern later games like, I mean, the perfect example is Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Fun fact, I'm sure you guys know this by now, but if you don't know, the demo, well, not a demo, kind of like a technical demo of how to represent the idea, what they wanted to do for Breath of the Wild, was actually a modified demo of the first Zelda NES game. And that whole freedom that you see on Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is thanks to this game, because this was the very first game that there wasn't any sort of tutorial, or they weren't like hold your hand until you're ready to explore the world. You just like go thrown out there, and literally all you have to do is like open left, find the cave, and then grab the sword and start swinging around. And this was groundbreaking, especially back in the day. You would think like, oh my god, it's such an old game, they don't tell you what to do, you just have to guess everything. And for modern younger audiences, this might be the case, and I might feel that way. However, we need to understand that back in the day that this was revolutionary, and it will become like such a oddity that you're just being thrown out on this world and you just need to explore without any guidance, without any tutorial or like point view of where to go. So this was our introduction to open world games without even knowing that it was an open world. Yeah, I don't know if that makes a little sense. but it was amazing, and I appreciate that. I mean, the game is hard as hell. I never finished it, and you know, the older the games, the harder it gets from you for some reason. However, it's been, you can tell how much this was the point of inspiration for future iterations, both 2D and 3D, and it was groundbreaking back in the day, and how it actually expanded on top of that with the later iterations. Of course, a few years later, we had Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, released in 1987, actually a year after, which is very fast. So there were some point they were both in development at the same time. And, you know, this is already was a change that, you know, it could be divisive for some people, because we're going from the top-down screen to kind of like a side-scrolling adventure. And it is very interesting. It's kind of like a Zelda mush with Mario. I guess they wanted to get a little bit of that feeling and familiarity to bring more audiences in. And, you know, up until the day, it's very odd looking, to be honest. I play a little bit of this more than I actually played the first one. It is. Controllers are tricky, although you only have 2 buttons, but somehow it is trickier than the first one. I'm even having a hard time with the NES Championships released on the Switch with the speedrun facts, because sometimes I find myself, I don't know what to do with the controllers when they ask me to do this stuff. I mean, I guess I'm not very experienced with this game either. But introduce a couple things like RPG mechanics, you know, like some like leveling and experience points, and some platforming elements too. Like I said, they try to get that platforming audience to get to experience this game, and they did it in a very good way. And you know, the dungeons and like the levels were like significantly harder than the first game, and of course we cannot deny that, you know, the final boss, including the first appearance of Shadow Link, or Dark Link as you know is properly known, and how it was one of the hardest things to beat. Only to think about, you can just be on the corner and crush yourself and just like stab his feet until he dies. But it was very interesting, and I feel like how the game like fleshed out a little bit after you get to the very end. It's very interesting. So I do appreciate that. Again, not my favorite. I don't see myself playing this like very often, if not at all. I feel like I'm playing like once or twice. I might have beat. I don't even remember how to beat it, to be completely honest. I just know I beat it way back in the day. But it was, they tried to get a little bit more of a experimenting with different aspects of not only like top down, as you will go in the overworld, and then you will go in the town, enter to the 2D sections along with the platforming style. But it was very interesting how they were trying to craft this sense of adventure, and you know, getting a little more detailed model of Link moving back and forward, talking to people, and giving a little bit more of a context. And that's, I feel, what the team started to care a little bit more about the story, because they know they had something there. They can flesh a lot of things out. Of course, this completely unraveled with the release of Ocarina of Time, and how Zelda became one of the pinnacles in terms of storytelling in gaming in general. But Adventure of Link was the introduction, or like the team trying to figure out how to evoke that in a 2D aspect. And then, ladies and gentlemen, we came to the gold standard of 2D games, which is A Link to the Past. A Link to the Past, which was released in 1991 for the Super NES, and it is basically the 2D standard for future Zelda games in the future. You know, we go back to that top-down formula that we're very familiar with, but they introduce us to a lot of things that became icons going forward. Like, for example, the Zelda's Lullaby, that melody originated in A Link to the Past, and along with the Master Sword and the format of the multi-layer dungeons that became such a staple and such a must-have on every Zelda game. up until this day. And, you know, of course, not only talking about the technical jump in terms of performance and visuals from the NES to the Super NES with more detailed visuals, the music, how from 8-bit to 16-bit really made a splash. And, you know, like I said, this is where the storytelling right before Ocarina of Time took a jump, and then on Ocarina of Time it just unraveled completely. I did not own a Super NES, and I didn't have access to this game that much. I do remember getting very far. I did not beat it. Yes, I know. I'm sorry. Yes, I know this might upset everyone. I truly enjoyed the game. Of course, it's a long game too. You get the dungeons of the light world, then you get introduced to the dark world and all the things that you need to do in the world to get to the very end. And, you know, which is also another inspiration, you know, like you see that how A Link to the Past introduced like the duality of worlds and like things to do, and now we see things like, for example, in the eventual sequence A Link Between Worlds, and then now took an inspiration once again in Tears of the Kingdom when they introduced the devs. It all elements from the past 2D Zelda games, and they were incorporating. So that's what I'm saying, that the 3D Zelda games should not have been as successful if it wasn't for the success of the 2D Zelda games. So that's why 2D Zelda games are just as important as 3D, because it's personally speaking, it's what set the standard and set the guidelines for all the amazing games that we have today. And yeah, I understand why A Link to the Past is one of, if not the best 2D Zelda game by the popular opinion. I will say I do have my personal favorites because it's by memory, and we're actually going to touch on those right now, which is the handheld adventures that we have, specifically the Game Boy handheld adventures. And we're going to start off with the game that actually grew up on me even more so when the remake came on the Switch, and that is Link's Awakening. You guys know I'm all about sad stories, right? So you guys kind of understand how Link's Awakening really had a huge impact in my gaming life and just storytelling in general. And, you know, for most, I mean, released in 1993 for the original Game Boy, we had that green screen. I played on my Game Boy Color, the DX version, the first time. And, you know, this was the first time that we actually get a 2D Zelda in handheld mode, which made it more of a personal experience. I feel like Link's Awakening by itself is more of a personal experience because it's one of those games that, like Majora's Mask, question a lot of things about life and things that we should be doing and if it's worth doing so, and how this particular game really broke the conventions of the cookie cutter Zelda formula that needed to be set in Hyrule, that we needed to be Ganondorf, and that we needed to save Zelda. None of these are in this game. However, we have one of the most compelling, revolving, heartbreaking storylines in any Zelda game, both 2D and 3D. And it's such a wild ride the moment you keep going in the game and you get to that point where the plot twist happened, which I'm sure you guys know already, but I'm gonna keep it spoiler free, hopefully. And how crazy makes you question whether you should continue this game or not, basically. But, you know, became such a cool factor and such cool features that came from A Link to the Past. Of course, the dungeons are back. Very nice dungeons that were designed here, with Turtle Rock and the Face Shrine being my favorites. Face Shrine especially, because that's where the revelation happens, and it is just insane. The whole ending sequence, I mean, wow. Even thinking about it makes me so melancholic. But that's how powerful this game is. And this is a 2D game. Again, I know I keep emphasizing how storytelling in 2D Zelda games evolve after A Link to the Past, and the fact that you evoke this sort of emotion, this very strong emotion, out of a 2D sprite-based video game on a handheld, it's just crazy. And I have to give it to the Link to the Past and Link's Awakening for bringing those powerful stories to the table. And this game just became much better on the remake on the Switch. I love those remakes. I know we had our reservations at first with the art style, especially coming from A Link Between Worlds, which had a very, very strong art style, more reminiscent of A Link to the Past, but brought in a 3D aspect, which looked really, really cool. To this day, still my favorite art style, but I really, really grew up the toy-like setting that Link's Awakening HD brought on the Switch. And I'm glad to see that it's being carried on now to the upcoming release of Echoes of Wisdom. But yeah, Link's Awakening, what a wild ride that game was, and how it really showed that it doesn't have to be always the same Zelda formula about saving the princess and defeating Ganondorf or Ganon. You can always bring a compelling story, and it doesn't have to involve the main characters. And we'll see this on the upcoming releases, of course, on the handheld side of things. And for that, we're gonna move on to my favorite 2D Zelda games. More so for nostalgia, because they were my first 2D Zelda games, the ones that came on my green Game Boy Color. It was Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages. If you ask me, Oracle of Seasons is my absolute favorite because it's the one I own. And fun fact, when I was given the Game Boy, my mom got me Pokemon Gold and he got me Zelda Oracle of Seasons, but it was like a bootleg copy. I had to do, I don't know how I did it, but I had to do some sort of like wizardry to get the save file to actual save and register my name, because I remember it keep resetting every now and then, but there was something wrong with the game. Of course, I didn't know this again. I was very, very young, but somehow I made it work, and I actually made the game. Then my best friends on the building across from me, they had Oracle of Ages, and when we discovered that both games connected to each other, kind of like a la Pokemon, it was just amazing. And this was a partnership that's happened with Capcom, so it kind of like made sense. Nintendo partnered with a company and made two games, and they tried to bet on the Pokemon formula, and I think it kind of worked a little bit. I mean, I did like, maybe not for like a long-term basis. I feel like it would be very dumb to do so, but this was a very nice approach. And the fact that the two games were linked, and by the end of one game you will get a code to put on the other save file from the other game, and then start on that, and how in the end when you beat the second game you get the actual ending, and how everything like turns out. It's actually a very, very creative idea, and I have to say that they really, for me, it was just very, very cool, because it promoted, socialize with anybody that had the opposite copy of yours, and maybe like trade so you guys can beat it. Maybe get both copies if you were lucky enough to do so back in the day. But yeah, Oracle of Seasons in particular is my personal favorite. I mean, it's more combat based. Of course, as we know, it's set up in Holodrome, which again breaks the conventions of being set up on Hyrule. And our mission is to save the Oracle of Seasons, Din, which for other games is one of the three goddesses, the goddess of fire. Different representations of that. And saving it from Onox, which was this big, sort of like armored, oversized Dark Knight basically. And that whole sequence in games, and then how you go through Holodrome, and then you describe there's a subworld, again the underworld aspect of it, which is Sabrosa, and it was just awesome. I had such good fun with that game. And the whole season mechanics, and like how by shaking the rod you would change the seasons, how you would need to go to all the temples to unlock season changing on your the rod of seasons. it was very creative, and like even when it wasn't puzzle derivative, it was kind of puzzly. But of course, with Oracle of Ages, I mean, it took it to a whole different level. I played Oracle of Ages afterwards. I feel like I did fell on the path that it was very puzzly, that I got stuck a lot. So maybe that's why I don't have that many fun memories of it. But now looking back, is actually a really, really good game, and the puzzles and the storyline, and going from from present to past, which we have done before with Ocarina of Time, brought a really, really unique perspective. I think I like Seasons better because it's like we never touch on the seasons per se, so it was kind of like a new concept in general. So I really appreciate that. And like I said, when the two games combine and we get that final ending, defeating this like mindless Ganondorf to save Zelda from Twinrova, and the Twinrova battle, which was actually ironically even much fun and complicated than the actual fight with Ganon itself, at least in my opinion. It was good, and it was nice to see Twinrova back in the spotlight. Such a popular enemy and character in general in Ocarina of Time, so I'm very glad that they're able to bring her back once more with the sisters, of course. And from there we move on to the Game Boy Advance era, which we had mostly revisions and remasters, quote unquote. I mean, we got the re-release of a Link to the Past, which was very nice to have in handheld mode. I think it was a very, very good choice. But along with that, we got the introduction to our first multiplayer 2D Zelda game, being Four Swords, and how they tried to break the conventions of just like a single player 2D Zelda experience and bring in multiplayer, and how this game tried to bring the multiplayer aspect, I would say. However, I feel like in terms of how it would work, because for you to play multiplayer Four Swords, you would need to have another person with a Game Boy Advance with a copy of the game and the cable link in order for you to communicate, which it was a little cumbersome, so I didn't even get the chance to experience it. I don't think I haven't played it to this day, but a lot of people seem to have fun with it, and I think this one is the one that has auto-generated dungeons, if I'm not mistaken. So that was a very interesting thing, having randomized dungeons in order to beat the game and save the princess. But of course, because of accessibility things, I wasn't get the chance to experience. What I did get the chance to experience, though, was the follow-up release in 2005, which is The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap. This is another one that unfortunately I have not finished, but what I played so far, I understand why this is such on a high regard. I believe Eslo as a side character is one of the most funny companions out there, with his sassiness, and the fact that he's actually your hat it's really, really cool. And it's very interesting how they start to like fledge in the story, of course, this being located early in the timeline, and introduces the Picori, the small race that can only be seen by children, and another pioneer on Zelda mechanics, which is the fact of like the Picori being a very small race, and they turn Link along with Eslo into small minuscule that you can explore the world in a whole different perspective, and it opened the doors to a lot of things. I think it was the first game. Well, A Link to the Past did it first on the remake here, on the port on the Game Boy Advance, putting the voice acting on Link, and that stood out going forward now. So now we have voice acting of sorts in 2D Zelda after the release of A Link to the Past and now the Minish Cap. I'm still yet to sit down and really, really go through the entire game and experience it. I mean, I did see clips and video, how it ends, of course, how the introduction and giving a little bit more context to Vati, which is our main villain of this game. That yes, it is set on Hyrule, but we have a different villain too, and how he could potentially be a really, really cool villain to even revisit now to this day, maybe in a 3D aspect. I feel like it would be very interesting to see how they can approach Vati if they ever try to approach it one more time. But great game nonetheless. I'm definitely gonna take my moment to sit down and finish it, but I understand how this really shake things up a little bit in Zelda, in terms of 2D Zelda games back in 2005. Then from there, we're going to not some of my favorites, I gotta be honest, and I'm gonna keep it short and sweet because I don't think I can say much about these games because I simply could not. And of course, we're talking about the DS era of Zelda games, both Minish Cap, both Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. I remember not having a DS first and foremost. My cousin had one. I bought the game for me so I can play on my cousin's DS because of course he had no interest in Zelda. And I remember grabbing it and I started off and I was just trying to move and I was like, why is it not working? Why is it not working? I'm pressing the D-pad. Why is he not moving? Only to realize that you can move Link with the stylus. And which of course makes sense because it's a DS. The whole mechanic relies on the stylus, just like Mario 64 DS did. My God, I don't think I made it through an hour playing, trying to figure these controllers out. And I just couldn't. I was excited that there was a sequel to Wind Waker. I really love that game to bits. The visuals were not appealing at all. The fact that Link's hair was flat on his face and his eyebrows will go over the hair kind of drove me crazy a little bit. So that didn't help the whole controller clunkiness factor. So I ended up dropping the game and I never played it again. I think I sold it actually to a friend in college. My God. Like, listen, if you liked it and you played through it, it's okay. It's fine. It's just that, I don't know, I just couldn't get over the fact of that. I was so excited. I wanted to play a conventional 2D Zelda game on the DS, which had like nice graphics similar to Nintendo 64. And then I ran into that and I was like, oh my God, why? And, you know, subsequently, I didn't even bother with Spirit Tracks. Like, I didn't even bother with Spirit Tracks. Again, if you enjoy the game, good for you. Absolutely. So happy for you that you enjoy the game that much. Myself, unfortunately, I had a different story to tell you, so I'm gonna refrain myself. Because, hey, listen, maybe I'll touch them back again. I mean, there are mods now on the 3DS that you can play the game with the circle pad. Maybe that would be a better way to experience it. But of course, there's some puzzles that are heavily based on the touchpad. By doing that, might be tampering with the game experience. If it's a very good adaptation, I might be able to check it out, you know, just for research. But I honestly have absolutely no interest, and I feel bad because I was waiting to get a nice Zelda game on the DS, and I was so disappointed with what I got. But again, that's just my opinion. It's just how I felt. I have little to no nostalgia or feelings about those games. So we're gonna move on to the 3DS era, which things get absolutely better with the spiritual successor of A Link to the Past, that being A Link Between Worlds, and how it really stacked out to be probably my second or my first. I mean, I go back and forth. I mean, I really like Link's Awakening on the Switch. I think it like made it to the top of the list, but looking back, I was replaying A Link Between Worlds not too long ago, and the creativity of that game was just amazing. I mean, not only going back to that Hyrule from A Link to the Past in some sort of way, but also how we were introduced to the mirror world of Lorule, which is literally the opposite version of Hyrule. You know, a take on the dark world, you may say, yes, but I think it has a little bit more depth and a little bit more, you know, this is a real world with real people living there on different circumstances. So it was really nice to explore. on that. But I think like the ice on the cake are two things. First of all, the ability of you to rent the key items and weapons, which give you a little bit more freedom on how to tackle the dungeons, and that was a really, really cool way to refresh this formula and how to explore this Hyrule one more time, with the ability to just like swap weapons and just tackle a dungeon whenever we feel like it. But also, of course, the main mechanic, which was the paintings, and how the ability to merge into walls allow us for new forms of exploration and puzzle solving, and how creative that was. And adding again to the freedom, and how like the puzzle solving took on a whole new level. I found myself, when I played this game for the first time, being stuck and like, what do? I can't jump this gap, only to remember 20 minutes later that I can merge into the freaking wall and just walk past it. And it's great, and the game looks amazing, and the cutscenes and the villain Yuga, I hope they bring her back in some sort of way, because I feel like her concept was really, really cool, and the way that how she merges to Ganon, spoiler alert, and that whole like battle sequence there with them in the end is just awesome. This game was a joy from start to finish, to the point that I actually might go pick it back up and like finish it, because my husband got it for me a couple of years ago. And I kind of be itching to play my 3DS again, so I might just pick it up and just continue there. But what a wonderful game that is! What a comeback for the A Link to the Past sort of storyline. I'd say this, quote unquote, of course. And it's just one of those games that I wish there was a way to bring it onto the Switch. I think it would do so much well if they do some sort of port or something like that, and just watch that whole thing in 3D and experience it. Would be really, really amazing. I'm gonna bring it back to the top spot on my 2D Zelda list if that happens. I really, really think so. Oh, and actually, I just realized I forgot to mention Four Swords Adventures, which was a game released on the GameCube for 4 players to experience for the 4-player Legend of Zelda experience there, with the resurrection of Bati, and this game that had a little bit more of a fledged story that the regular Four Sword has. And although particularly I did not play this one, it seemed really fun, and I see that it was a very appealing game. It was in the 2D aspect, released on the console, so you got a little bit more power in terms of graphics and design. It actually looks really well. Every time I see videos, it actually looks kind of cool, and I wish I had the opportunity to experience that. But I feel like for the 4 sword games, you need to experience it as intended, with the 4 people playing alongside. I feel that's how you will get like the full-fledged experience. So, briefly mentioning, looks very interesting, and I'll see if I have an opportunity to play it and like get the full gist of it. But it looked fun, look a little more fledged version than 4 swords, so it's great that we have briefly mentioned here. But lastly, we're gonna touch base in the other 3DS game that came out, which was Triforce Heroes. I remember this being announced and getting excited at first, and then when the whole thing started coming out, I was like, again, this is another like kind of like afterthought Zelda games that came out past the life cycle of the 3DS, basically. When was it released? Like 2015, maybe even like sooner than that. Not even sure, but again, another multiplayer Zelda game. They really try to push this formula to some extent. This is kind of like a mix of artworks between the Wind Waker style and A Link Between Worlds, which look really, really nice on paper. And I guess the good thing about this is that this is a game that you can still play in one player, although it gets a little tricky by you like controlling the other one character while the other 2 are just not moving, so makes it a little bit of a challenge. But again, another game that was set up on a different like settings, having a different princess. This is more focused like on the costumes and styles and all of that, so really not my cup of tea. But some people seem to have fun with it. So, and it's basically in the timeline of the game, so might as well include it. So there it is. Triforce Heroes for those who played it. And if you want to see how that, you want to share your experience, please let me know in the comments. I'll be happy to read and learn about your thoughts. And that brings us until today. As the time of this recording, the latest release has been the remake of Link's Awakening on the Switch, which I already mentioned how much I really enjoyed, and I even made me like Link's Awakening even more after playing it on the Switch. But even up until this day, this is where our next topic goes through, is how this 2D Zelda formula is still endures. And this is where the whole discussion of 2D versus 3D Zelda comes to fruition. And because now with the release of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom that break the conventions of a Zelda game or what it should be, whereas the 2D Zelda has been taking that same formula and maintaining it, and this is where the two can be separated as a maybe different genres. And I feel like, when we craving that sort of quote-unquote linear experience in Zelda games with like proper dungeons, very set storyline, and how puzzles, exploration, and combat as traditional as they can be, 2D Zelda is always going to be the way to go. I feel like unlike some 3D games, the simplicity of the 2D Zelda is something that it will be always like evergreen, and it could be like 10, 20, 30 years. We can still go back to A Link to the Past and play it and have a blast. We can still go back and play Link's Awakening or the Oracle games that we know for sure we're gonna get a very traditional and amazing gaming experience from that perspective. Whether the 3D games like Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and now with the new twist with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, those are games that will attest the test of time on a whole different way. 2D Zelda will scratch that edge of traditional dungeons and style, and that's the whole reason why it keeps coming back, is the fact that yes, we want to try something new with the 3D iterations, but we also want to keep the familiarity of what made Zelda the Legend of Zelda, and we go all the way back to the NES release and how that specific formula really set the bar for traditional puzzle world building gameplay. And this is now going to be even more expanded with the newest release coming up, which is Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. And I'm very excited because it's kind of like the best of both worlds, and I cannot wait to experience that for sure. And this is how the future of Zelda starts lining up, and I'm very excited to experience that. It is very important that Nintendo will continue this storyline and this format going forward. I don't feel like it's gonna stop, because it's like a whole different point of view in regards of Zelda. And I feel like this new release coming up with Echoes of Wisdom is just gonna be the introduction of what a truly open world 2D Zelda game can become in maybe 5-6 years from now. I mean, the fact that this is the first game that the main conventions that we're finally will get to play as Zelda is just crazy, because it's something that us players have been asking and clamoring, for a mainline Zelda title. But yes, you can play as Zelda in Hyrule Warriors, but I mean, that's not even canon. However, having the opportunity to get this game and interacting with the world as a princess, and making sure that she's very well represented as the holder of the Triforce of Wisdom, which is very heavily puzzle based, but puzzle based on how you are going to resolve it. Because the most interesting thing about this game, just like it happened with the 3D releases in the past 7 years, is that how people will approach a challenge and how many solutions can be for one simple task. And I think I think Echoes of Wisdom is going to be very special, and it's going to really stand out as one of the greatest of all time. And who knows, even Game of the Year. Some people might, the ones that are diehard Zelda fans that think like 2D is going to be always best in 3D, they're actually going to like this, and it's going to prompt them now to finally get to experience Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom on that same perspective. So again, Nintendo is very genius in terms of like how they can bring marketings together. And some people might have been hesitant on trying out these games. Well, let me bring you this concept on your favorite style of game and see if that makes you try this game that you've been hesitant about, because we give you a taste of what it could be. So I think it's great. I think it's great that they took this approach, especially now that the Switch is in its final year, when we are even more close to get that announcement of the successor. Having this support and these bangers of games, not only Echoes of Wisdom, but all the ones that are coming, the Mario Luigi Brothership, Super Mario Party Jamboree, and all of that. It's just great. And we're gonna keep getting Zelda until we turn 90, and we'll keep talking about this. I don't know, maybe we'll still making the podcast when I'm 90. So you never know what's gonna happen in the future. All I can say is 2D Zelda is not going anywhere. It's here to stay, and it's only gonna get better and better. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we reached the end of episode 11. We are back, baby. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Again, this was just me reminiscing off script about my favorite Zelda games in sort of chronological order. If I miss one, apologies. Again, this is just me going about my experience with Zelda games, giving you my favorite ones, my not so favorite ones. All this to build up the hype of what it could be many of us new favorite 2D Zelda game with Echoes of Wisdom coming out next week. So we're definitely gonna touch base a little bit on the next episode of how that journey is going. I want to hear from you as well. But I also want to hear, what is your favorite 2D Zelda game? Why is it your 2D favorite Zelda games? Do you agree with my picks? Do you not agree? If so, please interact, comment. I want to know your thoughts. You want to try to convince me to grab Spirit Tracks and Phantom Hourglass? Please do so. I'll be happy to give it a shot. If you know a nice mod to make the game more appealing, please let me know, because I feel like I need to fill those gaps on my resume. I'm gonna take on A Link Between Worlds one more time to experience that once again. I'm gonna finish the Minish Cap, and maybe, just maybe, we'll give another shot to the DS Zeldas. So with that being said, everybody, thank you so much for listening. It is great to be back on the mic, and it's only gonna get better and better. We're back to the 2-week formula, so we'll see you again in 2 weeks with a new episode. There's a lot of games coming out, a lot of milestones and anniversaries coming out. I have a lot of things to share with you and to show you, so I hope you guys are as excited as I am for the future of the podcast. You guys know where to find me. We are on X, we are on Blue Sky, we are on Instagram. We're getting active on Instagram little by little, so you can look them up as @12switcheroo. You'll be sharing a little bit more about me, my gaming experiences, my milestones. Please check that out. I really appreciate it. And of course, don't forget that we also stream on Twitch every weekend, twitch.tv @12switcheroo. You can catch the VODs on YouTube @12switcheroo as well. For everybody else, thank you so much for listening, everybody. I really appreciate your every single little support. If you still need to catch up with some of the episodes, please check them out. I really appreciate it. So far, we've been hitting a lot of streams lately, so very grateful that the podcast is taking off as they are. Let's keep the streak going. I'll make sure to keep the episode streak going for you to listen even more about what Daniel loves about video games in general. But anyway, once again, thank you, everybody. This is Daniel, aka 12switcheroo, signing off. Game on.